This is Andy Collins again, the Internet Hitting Coach, and today we're going to talk about the psychology of hitting and how to mentally take care of your swing, so that we've talked in other sessions about how to mechanically do the thing, but a lot of that, after that, just becomes in your head. So we've got Dr. Sari Fine Shepphird, a psychologist, an award-winning author, a consultant, adjunct faculty instructor, and is the director of Sport and Perform Consulting and Psychological Services, Inc. And she works with athletes and performers of the highest ability. So she has a website, and her sports psychology business focuses on reaching our peak performance. We obviously want to be the best hitters we can be. Focus on our goals. We'll talk about that. What are our goals in hitting? We want to improve our athletic performance and optimizing our potential. So these are the things that when Yogi Berra made this famous comment that baseball is 90% mental and the other half physical. So obviously that doesn't make sense, but at the same time, it does show how important someone that was a Hall of Fame player thinks of the mental side of the game. So let's talk to Dr. Shepphird about the portion of what she does that's specifically related to hitting. So Dr. Shepphird, can you tell us, how to be a good hitter, and then what people should be thinking about when they go up to the plate, and all these other questions that we've got defined for you here?
Sure, Andy, great to be with you. Well, you're right, and so is Yogi. He was right about so many things, even though sometimes we had to take an extra second to make sure that we understood what he was saying. But once you learn the mechanics of hitting, and you get that down, and you feel like you can move forward, you're comfortable with your mechanics and putting that into play and rehearsing that, and getting it to the point where you can do it without thinking about it quite so much. You've learned it and you've overlearned it. The difference between what makes someone a great hitter versus a good hitter is the 6 inches between their ears. And so a lot of what players these days do to make their game reach the next level is work on the mental side of things. And that's where I come in, because I'm a sports psychologist.
Okay.
So
yeah, so
go ahead.
I'll let you just kind of speak to the points of that really right here. I'm thinking, okay, I've learned how to hit. I think I've got it down pretty well. Then how do I elevate that? And then what do I think about when I'm doing my hitting in a game? Because obviously it doesn't matter if we're great. We used to call them great, batting cage batters. We don't want to be that. We want to be a great performer in the games.
Yes. And a lot of the people that I work with feel like they're really good in practice and in the cages, but when it comes to game time, they don't seem to be able to repeat that. So it's pretty common that people feel there's a difference between what they bring to practice or the cages and what they do in a game. And that's a lot of what I work on. So there's different things you want to keep in mind depending on which part of the season it is and which part of the game it is, and where you are as you're moving closer to the plate. So whether you're in the hole or whether you're in the on-deck circle, whether you're at the plate, there's different things you want to keep in mind. We can start at the beginning of the season, and you think about the goals that you want to accomplish for the season. That's when you do your big picture thinking. So you think about what it is that you want to accomplish as an individual and with your team, whether you have marks that you want to meet, particular performance goals that you want to hit, whether those are related to the number of wins, whether it's related to your batting average, whether it's related to your stats within your hitting. That's the time to set those kinds of goals. And of course, incorporate what your coach is wanting for you, and sometimes what Your other teammates are wanting from you, and sometimes even your parents might be wanting from you, but that's the time to think about those kinds of things and to set those goals. You want to keep track of those goals as the season goes on so that you can refer back to them and see how you're doing and mark your progress. I think it's always important to be able to check your progress and see how you're doing. But beyond setting those goals and checking your progress, in a way, you're kind of putting them aside once the season begins, because they can actually become counterproductive if you step up to the plate and you have too big of a picture on your mind. When you're at the plate, you want to have a much more narrow focus, which I will talk about in just a second. So the beginning of the season is the time when you want to set those big picture goals. When it comes to the day-to-day, so what do you think about when you're, say, at practice, for example, when you're in BP or at the cages? What is it that you should think about? A few things. One is the work ethic that you want to have. You want to make sure that you are bringing everything you can in terms of your effort, in terms of your motivation, and your consistency, your willingness to put in that consistent effort over time. That's something you want to make sure you bring to practice and to the cages, because if you don't have that effort and you kind of slack in that regard, obviously it's going to affect your performances during the game. Other things that you want to keep in mind during practice are the kinds of progress goals and process goals that you want to try to achieve. So how is that different than what I just talked about a second ago with goal setting? Well, at the beginning of the season, the kind of goals that you're setting are probably related to what we call outcome goals. The number of wins, your batting average, maybe the number of extra bases that you get over the course of a season or over the course of even just a game or two. But when you're in practice, you want to have a different kind of goal in mind, something that we call process goal. For example, I want to make sure that I am paying attention when I'm in the outfield. I want to make sure that I raise my percentage of hits from what I had last year. I want to make sure that I'm bettering myself in particular stats, or I'm wanting to make sure that I am giving more effort than I did last year. So those goals are more related to your level of effort, your productivity, your motivation, and maybe some things unique to yourself in terms of the kind of progress that you're making as a hitter. So there's a distinction there between outcome goals that you want to set at the beginning of the season and then more process related goals that you want to focus on during practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in fact, I was thinking of, when we're practicing, what we tell the kids that, when they're practicing, what they do in practice will normally translate as to what they do in a game. So why not practice game type of practice, even in practice?
Yeah, and that's something else that you're bringing up besides setting goals for practice, is how you can simulate game day situations during practice. And you're correct to say that a lot of what somebody does in practice will translate into how they perform during a game. And again, I'll mention a couple things that can be different, that can trip somebody up once they get to the game. But you're correct to say that a lot of what someone does in practice will translate, which is why you need to put in the effort and you need to have the motivation and you need to make the commitment during practice, because if you don't do that, that certainly will affect how you show up on the field and on game day. Absolutely right. Something that we often talk about is simulating game day situations where you can bring to mind during practice and when you're in the cages, the kinds of things that are usually on your mind during a game. Because usually during practice, there's not a lot on a player's mind. The hitter is really just paying attention to getting a clean look at the ball and putting the kind of swing on it that they want to. But when they get to the game, different things come into their minds that weren't on their minds in practice, like don't get a strikeout, or like there's a scout in the stands today, or my parents told me that if I don't bring up my batting average, they're going to make me quit because my grades are suffering, or other things that come into players' minds when they're in a game day situation because the pressure's on. So if you can simulate bringing some of that into your mind during a practice situation, then you can learn how to cope with it better and it doesn't sneak up on you as much.
Okay, so we went through the season and practice. Now it's game day. And then, like I said, what do you do kind of, like you said, on deck or in the hole? What are we thinking about so that it will help us in performing at that time?
So I talked about the beginning of the season being when you think about the big picture. Game day, you want to narrow your focus and your attention. You want to be in the present moment. That's something that's really different than the big picture kind of thinking that takes place before the season begins. You want to be as in the present moment as you can be during every portion of the game. So sometimes you might think about breaking the game down into segments, whether it's 7 innings or 9 innings, depending. You want to maybe break the game down into those segments so that you only have to worry about maintaining focus and attention for small segments at a time, rather than thinking about the whole big picture at once of the game, 7 or 9 innings, which can sometimes seem intimidating. You want to try to break it down into small sections. So you're focusing on 1 inning at a time or one half inning at a time so that you can maximize the idea of being in the present moment. It's not a time to think about the past, which is past mistakes, your performance in past games. It's not a time to think about the future. Are we going to win or lose? Is this going to get me the scholarship that I want or not? When you're in the game day situation, you want to have only the game on your mind and to break it down so that you're even thinking about smaller time segments than that, just 1 inning or one half inning at a time.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say then, maybe that even goes farther, even into 1 pitch at a time once you get up to the plate. But is there anything specifically that I'm thinking, okay, so we cleared our mind, that was one thing. Is there anything we should, kind of project forward, speaking about in the on deck circle or on the, at the at bat? Is there anything that's positive? We already kind of got rid of the stuff that might creep in. How do we put something maybe in that's good?
Right. Okay. So the idea for game day, just overall, is to be as in the present moment as you can be. But then what do you do when you're sitting in the dugout and you know that it's your turn to get up to the on deck circle next? That's when you can start to narrow your attention even further and regulate the intensity that you might be feeling. Some people call it regulating their energy or their nervousness, their anxiety, whatever word you want to use. I talk about regulating intensity, because your heart's going to start to go a little bit faster once you know that you're on deck next. You might start to imagine yourself at the plate. Maybe you have negative thoughts, seeing yourself strike out, or maybe there's pressure. I have to get a home run or whatever it might be. So once you know that you're on deck next, what you might want to do is take some deep breaths, because you're actually learning to control your body by doing that. Players will often tell me that they don't want to be nervous, but it kind of takes over and they start to feel nervous. Once they feel nervous, they start to have more anxious thoughts. So you can take control of that by taking control of your body's processes and reactions. This is something we can all do, is regulate our intensity. If you start to feel your heart rate going faster, your breathing gets more shallow, and you get those butterflies or you feel nervous, take a series of deep breaths, and what you're doing is taking control of that sensation. If you breathe deeper, your heart will be slower, your respiration will be slower, and your mind will start to feel more calm. So when you're in the hole and you know you're about to go on deck, that's something you can do, is start to regulate your intensity. Then what do you do when you get into the on deck circle? That's a great time to use a skill called imagery, where you start to imagine, or some people will call it visualize what it is that you want to execute, what you want to see happen. So you can imagine yourself now while you're on deck at the plate. You feel calm and confident, and you feel in control of that situation. And again, you're narrowing your attention even further, so that you're now starting to think only about the moment that's about to come at you when you're at the plate, and nothing else that's transpired during the game, nothing else that might transpire after. You're now just getting ready to execute your skill, what you've worked so hard to do. So you've calmed yourself, you've calmed your body down with some deep breathing. You're now on deck, and you're starting to imagine yourself executing the way you want to. Something else that you can do on deck is just keep in mind that the looser you are, the better you will perform. If you have extra muscle tension, if you feel that tightness, if you feel like there's pressure, it's going to come across in how your body, your muscles react to that pressure. And so you're going to get tight. And if you're tight, you have a more narrow range of motion. You're not going to be able to execute the swing that you'd like to be able to put on the ball. So go ahead and get loose. And of course, that's something you probably naturally do when you're on deck. But keep that as part of your game plan. When you are on deck, you're going to get loose. You're going to see yourself executing the way you want to, and you're going to get loose. So keep it simple. Don't add too much to that, because you don't want to have too much on your mind. Just get loose and see yourself executing the way you want to. Then what? Obviously, this is now the do or die moment when you step up to the plate. There's not a lot that you want to have on your mind when you step up to the plate. You've already calmed your body and you've readied your mind. You've calmed your body by taking some deep breaths and by getting loose and getting your muscles primed to be able to perform at your best. You've already seen what it is that you want to do in your mind, so now you're ready to execute. So there's not a lot that you want to have on your mind. Usually what I talk about with hitters is to have only one swing thought on their mind when they step up to the plate, whatever that might be. And I'm not talking about a mechanical thought. I'm talking about something that helps to trigger that idea that here I am, this is the moment, and I'm going to execute. And for each player, that thought will vary slightly. So for some, it might be something like, get a clean look, because they're just telling themselves that if they can see the ball cleanly, they know what to do. They know how to react to that. For some, they need something that's just a reminder of what it is that they're doing at the plate and keeping it simple, like execute. Or for some, it's blast off. Or for some, it's, hit it hard. It's really going to depend on each player and what seems to resonate with him or her the most, but it's keeping it simple. And all you want to do at the plate is execute your swing. That's it.
Okay. All right. So once they've taken the first swing, they may have gotten it. They may have gotten a ball, so they didn't swing at all. Is there anything in between these pitches, especially that one that you go, I just missed it. They fouled it off instead of it going over the fence. Is there between pitches that you want to be thinking about?
Yeah, in between pitches is actually a really important time for a player to activate their minds the way that will enable them to perform their best for the next pitch. Because in between pitches is really like a do or die time. If you make a mistake or you perceive that you make a mistake, or like you say, you tip it off or whatever it might be, and you feel like your effort hasn't paid off the way you want it to, you can react negatively. You can start to get more tense. You can become impatient. You can get angry with yourself, or worst of all, which is very common, is you can start judging yourself. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why isn't this happening the way I want it to? And that's the last thing you want to do, because you're going to get more tense. You're going to feel more pressure, and you're not going to use that time wisely. What you want to be able to do during that 12 to about 28 seconds, depending, is to be able to refocus and start that process over again. So you want to make sure that you are calming your body. Take another deep breath. Take what we call a cleansing breath and in between pitches, and just relax your body again. Do whatever you need to do to get loose again. So whether that's take an arm swing, whether it's just kind of intentionally calming your body, dropping your shoulders, making sure you're not carrying tension in between your shoulders and your upper back, taking that deep breath as I talk about, and then giving yourself, again, some kind of a cue or a phrase that gets you ready for the next pitch. Because if you're thinking about the last pitch, your mind is in the past. That's not the present moment. That's the past. If you're worried about how you're going to perform on the next pitch, that's the future. That's not the present moment. That's the future. You can't control the past. You can't control the future. The only thing you can control is the present moment. So relax your body again, take a deep breath, consciously relax your upper back and in between your shoulders, and then give yourself a word to propel yourself forward. So for a lot of athletes, it's something as simple as next pitch. Other athletes will just use that same phrase that they used the pitch prior, whether that's execute or get a clean look or hit it hard, whatever that is. But you have to just get your mind back to being in the moment, not in the past, even if it was just one pitch ago, and not in the future in terms of imagining where that ball's going to go. You want to make sure you're in the moment as much as you can be.
Okay, you use the expression cleansing breath and deep breath. Is there a difference, or what is that?
There's not a difference except for the intentionality, just the mindset. When I'm talking about a cleansing breath, it's like let it go. Let go of the pressure, let go of the stress, let go of the mistake you just made, just cleanse yourself of it. Some people will actually add an image or a visualization in there in between pitches. So for example, if they're getting tense, if they're mad at themselves, if they're starting to judge themselves, they'll use an image. They might step on the dirt in front of the plate and squash that last pitch. They might see themselves kind of flushing down the toilet that last pitch. They might see like themselves balling up that last pitch and throwing it away. And it might sound a little lame, but it really helps the mind let go of what just happened. So when I talk about a cleansing breath, I'm talking about letting go, cleansing of what just happened so you can move on. The worst mistake a hitter can make is not moving on from the last pitch. You will get more impatient. You will start to swing at things you wouldn't otherwise swing at. You'll start to put pressure on yourself because you're thinking that's one less opportunity you have. And those thoughts are all counterproductive. What you want to do is make sure that you make yourself as productive as possible to execute the swing that you want to execute. So all you have to do is relax your mind and refocus your mind, and then you're ready for the next pitch.
Okay, then you've had your at bat. You either, yay, we got a hit, we scored the winning run, whatever it was, that's great, or we struck out, or we ground into a double play, horrible. What's our mental focus at that point? What should we be doing?
What can you learn from what just happened? What can you learn from what just happened? That's what your mental focus should be when your at bat is over. What you don't want to do is start to judge yourself and start asking questions like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I hit? Why did that just happen? Because you'll start to lose a sense of control. You'll start to feel like you don't have any control over what happens. Obviously, that's a counterproductive way to think. And you're going to carry that with you to your next at bat if you don't get rid of that. So what you want to do is think about what you can learn from what just happened. Are there any adjustments that you need to make? Whether that's to your swing, to your stance, to your mindset. And if there are adjustments, then you make those adjustments. If there are not adjustments to be made, then you just stay patient and you wait for your next opportunity. Once you start to let that negativity creep in, it will affect your next at bat, maybe even your next game or your next string of games. And you don't want to take that negativity with you. So again, what can I learn? After you figure out what you can learn from what just happened, you move on. You remind yourself that there's more at-bats coming, and you want to make sure to execute those effectively and keep your thoughts productive. So you don't want to stay stuck in the past, even if that was just a few minutes ago or 3 innings ago or whenever your last at-bat was. You want to move on so that you can be in the present moment and be ready for your next at-bat when it comes.
Okay, I appreciate that's a ton of good information, and I think will help our hitters. Is there anything? One real quick thing is any of what we just talked about specific for a high-level player, or what about a beginning player? Or is it pretty much, yeah, if I can think through all of this stuff the way you just mentioned, it's the same for anyone.
Well, one of the things that's different is the amount of repetition that a accomplished player or someone who's not a beginner will have, so that their minds can be more freed up to just pay attention to their mindset and to pay attention to just relaxing their minds. So a beginning player obviously is going to have more of the mechanics on their minds. That's okay. That's the time to have it on his or her mind, because you haven't had the repetition to be able to feel like you can execute that without thinking about it. But once you get to the point that you've had enough repeats, you've had enough opportunity to practice your swing that you can now do it without thinking about it quite as much, you want to move away from thinking about the mechanics and be able to get your mind into the present moment and just execute without thinking about too much. If you have too much on your mind, it will get in the way when you're at the plate. So you want to keep things as simple as possible. And like I talked about, just have one or two things on your mind. One or two things on your mind in the hole, one or two things on your mind on deck, one or two things on your mind at the plate.
Okay, well, that answers that question. Thank you very much. And I think you even talked about this, I call imagining or imaging, but visualization. I think we already covered that. But I do have one question for you on the thought of intention. I think sometimes we train players, or you may have a coach that doesn't train according to, we were going to be introducing a lot of good ways to hit here, and maybe your coach doesn't exactly do it that way, but their intentions seem to help execute the right way anyway. What I'm talking about is, if I am being told all the time, hit it hard, hit it hard, hit it hard, somehow, whether I have the right mechanics that I was taught, somehow I figure out a way, my body almost tells my brain to do something different than that. Or I use a phrase to tell the kids, hit it to the grass, because so many kids, just for the most part, when you swing level, or some coaches actually tell them to hit it down, well, they're not going to get it. It's impossible to get it to the grass if you're hitting it down. I guess they're thinking you can get the bottom half of the ball and maybe it'll go up, and that's okay. But when I tell the kids hit it to the grass, even if they somehow were always hitting weak grounders, they somehow seem to know how to, their mind seems to adjust in such a way as to get it elevated, and it goes to the grass. Even though we didn't change anything with the mechanics of what they did. They already were taught some of the mechanical things. Now they just weren't getting good success. We tell them one thing different, and then they get better success just on the intention. Is that something that is effective or not, or how do we pull that in there?
It's very effective, and it happens across sports as well. I mean, you hear that a lot from golfers. They'll just change one small thing, whether it's a word or the way they are thinking about approaching their swing, and everything changes. And it's the same with hitters as well. Our mind processes things in chunks, and when we break things down too much, sometimes it becomes counterproductive, because it gives us just one more thing to think about, but that one thing becomes almost like the stick that you would stick in between someone's bicycle spokes that sends them over the top and then falling flat on their faces on the pavement. So sometimes when we make things too mechanical, it interferes with our mind's desire to think about things in a big picture way, or sort of in chunks of information that allows us to process things effectively. So that's part of what you're talking about. If you tell me to hit it to the grass, now I'm going to engage my visual mind so that I can see the ball going there. I'm going to then engage my muscles that respond correspondingly to be able to launch it at that angle. And I'm going to sort of simplify things for myself by just thinking about hitting it to the grass. If you tell me you have to hit it on this third of the plane of the ball, it makes it more complicated because I feel like I have to be too exact. So sometimes making things more easy to digest for our minds actually makes a difference in the way that we perform. And I think that's part of what you're talking about. Another thing I think that affects that is that we can quiet the part of our mind that over analyzes things. So again, instead of feeling like I have to make things more complicated, which is just going to interfere, if I can simplify things, it helps me to perform better. So I think that's, again, a little bit of what you're talking about, and why when we look at the mindset or the mental side of hitting, we talk about keeping things simple, because then our bodies and our minds can respond to that by just executing the way we know how to.
Okay, well, that explains a little bit for me. I appreciate that. I just realized we've got a slide deck of about 15 things, and we've gone through about 3 or 4 slides, but this was the main one. But you've got so many other great things. You've got a whole website we can send people to. But if you've got some extra time, I wouldn't mind talking about, because they affect the whole player, not necessarily the hitter. When we go, the integration of the mental side of sport with physical skill and strategic training is what separates good teams and athletes from the truly elite. This is something you said on your website. So maybe, and I noticed I highlighted the achieve the balance between work and academics, because so many of our players are either high school players, or they're going to be, or they want to play in college. So that's one. Reducing stress in all areas will help us in a hitting, but also as a player. Increasing consistency. We want to perform at a high level all the time, not just some of the time. So briefly discuss this, and I've got some other things that I found on your website as well.
Sure. So this is where we really get into the mental side of sports. Again, once you got your mechanics down, there's a fine line, but it really does separate the good players from the elite players. Enhancing performance is often done through mental skills training, where we talk about how you can maximize your focus and attention, how you can stay calm and confident, relaxed in the sort of zone that you want to be. Obviously, you don't want to be too relaxed because you're just not going to care. You don't want to be too tense because you're not going to execute effectively. So you want to get in that zone for optimal performance. And so we talk about that. We talk about being able to say the right things to ourselves. We don't want to be negative. You want to have positive self-talk. The things that you want to say, you want those to be things that help you execute more effectively, and you don't want to get in your own way. So that's another thing that we talk about on the mental side of sports. We also talk about developing a routine. You've probably heard about a pre-bat routine or an at-the-plate routine that helps to increase consistency. There's a lot that you cannot control in a softball or a baseball game, but what you can control is your consistency. You can control how you approach the on-deck circle, how you approach the plate, and how you execute that moment in time, each pitch that you receive, or if you're in the outfield or on defense, again, same. You can control how you execute at your position. So we talk about creating routines that help to increase consistency and give players a greater sense of control on the field and at the plate. And we talk about ways to reduce stress and anxiety, because anxiety can be a performance barrier. It might be that you're worried about your performance, worried about the consequences of your performance, worried about what people are thinking of your performance, what they might say about your performance. So we talk about how to manage that, and being able, again, to increase focus and attention so that your mind is trained to be at the plate on each pitch one at a time, or in your position on seeing the ball the way you're supposed to see it and reacting appropriately and effectively, rather than letting your mind go places that are going to be counterproductive.
So then that brings us to this achieving balance between work, academics, and home lives. We want to be this great player, but then sometimes the other can suffer. How do we put that together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. Athletes need balance, just like anyone else. And if you look at some of the highest level athletes, we see what happens in their lives when they don't achieve that balance or maintain that balance, whether that's substance abuse or eating disorders or difficulty maintaining relationships or sometimes panic disorder, anxiety problems, depression, just feeling stressed all the time. And obviously that's not only going to affect an athlete's performance on the field and at the plate, but it's going to affect the athlete's quality of life. So keeping in mind that balance is important for every athlete at every level is a central principle of what I often work on with people. So do you like going out with your friends, and is that an important part of your life? Then make sure you maintain that even if you're getting more serious about your game. You don't want to isolate yourself to the point that you start to lose balance and you feel like you have no friends and you feel like softball or baseball is the only thing you're living for, and you start to feel like your life's getting out of control or you're feeling depressed or whatever the case may be. Balance is important. If you like time to yourself, make sure you maintain that. Even if it starts to shrink a little bit, it needs to be part of your life. If going to school is one of your goals, then academics, again, has to be a part of that big equation. And sometimes it takes a little bit of effort to solve the equation and figure out how to plug it all in, but it can be done. And I think that's an important thing for athletes to take a look at.
Okay. And well, of course, it goes without saying that anybody that's at a younger level is looking to possibly get a college scholarship, well, your grades are effective. It's not, I think best example we had just a really high level shortstop playing for us, and she could have, from her skill level, she could have played at any college in the entire country. She ended up on academic probation in a school in a snow country that almost had no softball because we're snowed in all the time, and that was the only place that would even take her because her grades were so bad. And same thing. A friend of mine was coaching at Cal, and she said, "Don't even send anybody that isn't getting a 3.7 or higher." So that becomes. But then, like you said, if I've got to get my grades up and be great at softball, how do I do both?
Yeah. And that's exactly why balance is such an important part of that big equation, because if you do end up playing at a college level, your schedule is going to be much busier than you might expect. Sometimes athletes who play softball or baseball in college feel like every moment is spoken for. So keeping in mind the idea that you want to make sure there's balance is really important. And I know that's true for high school and youth athletes as well, because you spend so much time and so much effort at your game that you can start to feel like you don't have a life outside of your sport. But it's important to make sure that that's part of the equation. And again, sometimes it takes some problem solving to figure out how to do that, but it can be done. It can be done. It just takes some problem solving to do it.
All right. Well, let's move on here. Yogi Berra also said, "Slump, I ain't no slump. I just ain't hitting." Some of the things, what do we do to get out of performance breakdowns or inconsistency like you were talking about? And then we have the opposite effect where some people are playing so hard, so long that they burn out. We had 5 kids that made their varsity team as freshmen, and by the time they were seniors, none of them played in college because they were done.
Yeah.
So, you talk about all these other things on your website as well in your business.
Yes, all the things that you see here I talk about, and they're all really common. I think burnout is more common now than ever before because recruiting starts at younger and younger ages, and players are often playing year round, training year round, and often have multiple coaches and are working on their game from different facets all of the time. And so burnout is much more common these days. And I think there's pressure that parents feel, that athletes feel, that coaches feel, that school programs feel, starting at younger ages. And so so burnout's a real issue. And I think some of the things that I've mentioned make a big difference in keeping balance as an important part of the equation, but also making sure that an athlete is playing for the right reason. Because sometimes athletes will play because they feel they have no choice, or because they feel they have to, or because they're afraid of the consequences if they don't. And so sometimes you have to have conversations about that and work that out for an athlete to be able to find something inside themselves that he or she plays for, because they love to play, because they love competition, because they love the social aspect of it, because they just love the game. And to be able to make sure to take that kind of motivation with them month after month, season after season, year after year. And that helps to reduce burnout if you're playing for the right reasons.
Okay, well, the good news, I have some good news for you. The NCAA just initiated a no contact until their junior year, where they were going all the way down to 10, 12 years old. They can no longer do that. And so that's good news to take some of that pressure off the younger players.
Yes, it is.
And then so this is what you do, and you have this. We'll put in the chat box this little 5 reasons top athletes work with a sports psychologist. You do work with professionals, I assume, and you work with high-level ones, but I assume you work with other people. But for the most part, it will probably be these. And did you want to touch on any of these? I guess we've talked almost about all of these different issues. So
yeah, we've mentioned them. I think we've mentioned each of them in passing. I don't think we talked a lot about confidence. Usually when players walk in my office or when I meet them on the field for the first time, that's the word that they use, is confidence. Players lack confidence. Sometimes they lack confidence for specific reasons that they can't pinpoint. And it might be their attention. It might be their consistency. It might be their focus. It might be executing a particular aspect of their game. But confidence is a word that they often use when they describe what they're lacking and what they want. Or parents will often call me and say that that's the issue, is their son or daughter lacks confidence. And so a lot of the things that I've talked about make a difference in confidence. But sometimes there's things going on off the field. Again, I mean, I mentioned obviously athletes are people. And so just like any other segment of society, we have things that go on outside of our job or off of the field that can affect our play and our confidence level as well.
okay, all right. Well, and then you have a couple of other areas that you deal with. And you were talking about how coaches sometimes, how they interact with athletes that have injuries. I mean, obviously a hitter specifically is going to have problems if they have wrist injuries, and or if they have a ankle injury and they can't really get some kind of balance going, or can't push off from some of the inner legs of their hitting. What do you talk about in how to deal with the emotional road to injury rehabilitation?
Well, I think the physical side of injury is what we usually talk about, but the emotional impact of injury is often more significant, because a player worries about whether she'll come back at the same level she was when she left and got injured. Again, time starts to shrink. It seems like opportunities are running out, and then that can impact a player's anxiety about whether he or she will get drafted, or whether they'll get a scholarship, or whether they'll go to the school that they want to. So there's more pressure, there's more worry, anxiety. It can lead to pressing and playing with a greater sense of pressure. So that's something that is really common. Also, what happens when you have multiple injuries in a season? Because that happens. It happens, more frequently than maybe we like to talk about. But that gets into a player's mind. It affects their psyche, and sometimes players can start to wonder if if things are just against them, or the world is against them, or it's just not meant to be, and they can, get depressed and down on themselves and feel like as soon as they get back, they're getting another injury, and it starts to unravel their motivation, their performance, again, the pressure and anxiety that they feel. So there's a lot of things about injury that affect players on the mental side of sport, and we deal with those things.
Okay, we have a gal that just got injured in a car injury. She broke her back and broke her neck. The good news is she didn't get paralyzed, but she's got a long road. She's not thinking about the next game or even this season. But is her softball career over? I would imagine is something she's thinking about. What can she do? I mean, she's in so much pain that she probably is taking some of the heavy duty drugs. Can you train your brain to turn off the pain? Can you, when everybody else is practicing, you were talking about the window is shrinking, can she do visual imagery of the same exercises the other kids are doing to kind of shorten her time back onto the field and performing at the high level?
There's a lot of things players can do when they're injured that keeps them an active part of their own recovery, which gives them a greater sense of empowerment and control. Obviously, you can't control so much of what happens when you're injured, most of it, but there are a lot of things that you can control about your recovery. You can mentally rehearse your skill so that when you get back to a playing situation, you feel like it's more familiar and more practiced. You can see yourself executing the way that you want to. And it actually does make a difference in people's performance. Study after study after study shows that this is true. So it's not just positive thinking. It's actually using your mind to rehearse your skill. We know even from fMRIs that the same parts of your brain are activated when you imagine yourself performing an action as when you're actually performing the action. And so it translates into better execution when you get back on the field or at the plate. So that's something players can do. Sometimes you have to navigate depression and anxiety, identity concerns, like who am I if I'm not a softball player, a baseball player? That comes up when a player is injured. And so it's important for players to be able to talk about how they feel. I mean, I am a psychologist, so of course that's going to be something I think is important, but problem solve it too. What can I do to help my own recovery? That's a part of it. Other things that studies have shown are helpful is relaxation imagery that helps the blood flow in your body so that you actually are assisting your body with recovery, because we know how important blood flow is. It's why you elevate your injured area. But if you practice imagery that helps to stimulate blood flow and breathing, like yoga breathing, deep breathing, that again helps to stimulate blood flow, you're assisting your body in recovery. So there's a lot you can do to give yourself a sense of being able to be active and a part of your own recovery rather than just sitting there feeling helpless.
All right. I appreciate that, and I will pass that on to this gal. And actually, one of the better, one of your target areas of thing that you've even written a book on is anorexia. And obviously, since softball played by girls, I would say more so than men, but maybe I'm wrong. You have a couple of handouts that we can put in the chat box as well for people if it's something that you feel like they want to privately deal with this. But explain your area of expertise there and stuff, and then we'll just briefly touch on that.
Sure. That's actually how I transitioned into sports psychology to begin with. I'm in my second decade working in sports psychology, but prior to that, I focused almost exclusively on eating disorders. And the people that I was seeing coming through my door were athletes, because there are higher rates of eating disorders in athlete populations than in the general public. there's a lot of pressure on athletes to maintain a level of fitness and a level of intensity and of productivity that can start to take a toll, not only physically, but mentally. And one of the ways that athletes sometimes cope with stress is to develop problem behaviors because it seems like an escape. Sometimes it's substance abuse and sometimes it's food. So whether that's binging and purging, starving oneself, these are sometimes things that happen to athletes because they're looking for ways to cope or escape. And sometimes it's because it's part of a culture, a team culture. It does happen with anorexia specifically, does happen with men as well as women, but it is more common in women. But binge eating is just as common in men as it is in women. So depending on the kind of eating disorder, we see it just as often in men as in women. But there'll be a team culture. You know, maybe one or two women might have disordered eating, and then it becomes part of what's talked about, and it becomes something that kind of is contagious, and ends up infecting, you know, a team's worth of players. So they're serious illnesses. And it's one of the things that I've talked about for almost 3 decades now.
Okay. So they can get your book, they can download these little resources. So I will leave that part, since it really isn't our focus today, but it's definitely, if anybody that's listening today has any kind of issue with this, it is serious, and please take advantage of the resources that are here. So I want to thank you for giving us your time and your expertise, and hopefully people got enough out of it and they can take these things and reach the next level for them. But if someone does want to talk to you, how would they connect? We've got some of your website, your email address, your phone number.
Yep. Any of those ways are good. If players on social media, they can find me on Twitter at Dr. Shepp, spelled the same way that you see here. Instagram, same thing. On Facebook, I'm at Sari Fine Shepphird. So you'll have to go back to the slide and see how to spell it. But you can connect with me any of those ways too. All
right. So we're going to stop and we'll say hi at the bigger level. So I do thank you for your time, and best of luck in your practice, as well as best of luck to all of you that are viewing and being a better hitter. So thanks.
Thank you, Andy, and best of luck to all your players. Best of luck to you.
Okay, good. Thanks.
I'm unmuted. So if you want to hang out and we can talk, I try and promise you that they'll only take an hour, and we did a lot of our talking at the beginning. So it is 5 o'clock on our time. You're welcome to leave if you'd like, but if you'd like to ask a few questions, give a few comments, you did already in the chat, but a couple of, Daniel, you were asking about introducing these concepts to all ages. I wasn't quite sure, but I've coached anywhere from 6 years old all the way to 65. So
yeah, okay.
What specifically you're doing? What, 8, 10, 12s or something like that, or 10, 12?
Yeah, at the moment, most of the youth at the 12 or under age group.
Right. Okay.
But my daughter's in the 14-year age, playing with older girls as well. So some exposure there to more sort of elite type players, which is interesting.
Right. Yeah, that's always a tough one. I was one of the coaches at the World University Games, and a lot of those girls, in order to get better competition, what they would do is they'd play up, but they'd play up in the 23 and under league so that they could even get anywhere close, because they weren't in an area that had a lot of people. The disadvantage that they didn't understand was that there isn't a college coach around scouting you at 23 and under. So you kind of have to go where the scouts are, and so forth. So
yeah, and I think the difference when the younger girls do play up is the mental side of things that we were listening to today. You can see those players that have been playing for a lot longer. Even like my daughter might have great mechanics or whatnot, but the difference might be just how the mental side of the game is approached.
Good. So this was good information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I know. It's a little frustrating to see that there's not as many people coming on live, because I know how much the information helps. But you guys are here, so I don't want to belabor my problems of getting people to hear it. It's great info, and and the person I have on tomorrow on strength and conditioning, he was 10 years with the Team Canada that's coming into the Olympics. He was their strength and conditioning coach. So, I get the best of the best to get the information. So you will enjoy that as well. Did anybody want those links? They are on Dr. Sheppherd's website. I can throw those in here. I didn't want to be looking online and interrupting the feed here. So that was the only challenge that I had about doing that. So I see Will is still on here. If you want to join in or tell us where you're from. I don't know. I heard somebody was from San Diego. I don't know if that's you, Will, or not. We know where Chris is from. Daniel and Mark are in Australia. Chris is in Virginia. And Will, or whoever's using Will's name, that's always fun sometimes. Connecticut. Okay, there you go. So you're also 8 o'clock now. So, all right. Well, if you don't have any other questions, we will chat again. Are you guys getting the emails that I've sent out for the links in case anybody misses it? I would like it if you would invite, like Daniel, you invited Mark. I appreciate that. If you have others that could benefit from this, please forward any links on, or have them join us tomorrow. That would be great. So, all righty.
Can
Yes,
I catch up on? Can I catch up on?
Yes. What
some you may have had?
Right. What I'm going to do is I'll send out an email today that will tell you about where the links are for the last two. They were on hitting mechanics and on vision training. But then I'm also going to put them together. I've put them together on a DVD and also have them in a course, so you could actually buy them there. So, I mean, I've set it up for free, but if you wanted to have one to help share with other coaches and friends, that would be great. So, all righty, I appreciate it, all you guys, and we will, or assuming Will is a guy, but I will talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
All righty, goodbye.